Who's ready to get started? If you're ready to start, say, let's get it. Oh, I almost believe you. That was fantastic. First question of the day. What has been your biggest failure so far this year? Think about that for a second. What has been your biggest failure so far this year? If you're like most people, that's a really difficult question for me to ask. And it's difficult for two reasons. Either you've never failed. I don't think that's true, so we'll just scrap that one right off the top, okay? I don't know anybody that hasn't failed yet. More likely, it's because we are resistant to admitting our failures. I used to teach a class on how to get a job. How many of you guys have taken like a job-seeking strategies kind of class, maybe in high school, something like that, where they taught you how to go through interviews and do all that? Okay, how many of them taught you how to answer the what is your biggest weakness question by trying to reframe a strength into a weakness? Anyone ever heard of that, right? All right, what's your biggest weakness? Well, I just work too hard. I don't have good balance, right? And I've been on the other side of that now. So I've been on hiring, and I used to tell people to do that, and now I'm like, it sounds so fake. Like, I don't believe that. You tell me, oh, my biggest weakness is I work too hard. You're lying to me right now. That's what you're doing, okay? And so, but that's kind of how we're keyed up as human beings, all right? Because we are the superhero in our own story. Just the reality. So when Aaron asked me to come talk to everybody, he said, I want some high-level stuff. So that's what I want to give you guys today, all right? I want to give you some high-level stuff that applies to our everyday experience. And this question is kind of high level because we like to make excuses. And if you are sitting there right now and you actually had something that popped into your mind, you're like, oh, if he points at me right now, I've got something. I'd be willing to bet that the majority, maybe not every single one of you, but the majority of you were going to give me some mamby-pamby failure that's not even a real failure. Because you're not going to make yourself look bad on purpose. As a general rule, it's going to be something weird like, oh, well, I cheated on my diet. I mean, that's not good, but that's not a life-crushing failure, okay? That's not keeping you up at night. That's not ruining the best thing you've ever had. That's not a 15-year relationship walking out the door. Failure, real failure, the thing that you're petrified of, the thing that scares you to death every day, the thing that you don't want anyone to know about, that failure. Now, I'm not going to ask you to answer that out loud right now, but that's what I'm asking you to think about. What's been the thing that's just kind of in a little bit of a way ruined your life this year? What's been the thing that has really, really sucked? And I want to attack that topic today. I want to work with you guys and I want to say, hey, let's attack this idea of failure and let's look at it from a whole different perspective and hopefully let's make it actually more positive than negative. So, who's ready?
Let's go.
I do not believe you at all. If you're ready, say, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
All right, very, very good. Let's do this. The first step to failure is you've got to own it. Stop hiding it. Stop minimizing it. Stop making it seem like it doesn't matter. Stop pretending like it doesn't exist. We have to own our failures. When we hide our failures, they become exponentially bigger. Just today, I checked out of the motel. Actually was talking to the owner. He was the franchise owner. He happened to be checking me out, and he's like, hey, what are you doing here in town? I told him what I was doing here, and we got into this I would have been here like a half hour earlier, Walker. I got into a whole conversation with the owner of this motel that I stayed at, and we were talking about this idea that when we try to hide our failures, it actually makes things worse. And for him, and for any business owner that's kind of service-oriented, Google reviews are a big deal, right? And so for him, if his staff hides a failure and he can't address that head on, what's it likely going to turn into? A public catastrophe of a problem, right? So we have to own our failures because if we don't, they only get bigger and it becomes exponentially bigger. Now, how many of you guys know who Nikola Tesla was? Okay, some of you. How many of you guys are driving a Tesla right now? No one. Man, when I asked Phoenix, like 5 hands were raised. It was crazy. We're going to need you guys to do better in sales. No. Overrated. Hey, I'm not driving a Tesla. But they're all over the place, for sure. And but here's the thing. How many of you know someone with a Tesla? Or you see Teslas?
There's a guy in this office that has a Cybertruck downstairs.
So, ooh, all right, there we go. How many of you have ever driven or seen anyone driving a Nikola? How many of you know that when Tesla was first starting out, they had another alt-fuel competitor called Nikola that was working on a hydrogen-powered vehicle? Anybody knew that? No? A couple of you? All right. Here's the thing. They failed. Don't get me wrong, they're still a company, but they didn't have what they said they did, and instead of owning it, they tried to hide it. They went so far as to take their prototype and video it rolling down a hill so that they could get the stock price to go up. And so if you invested in Nikola, that is what their stock chart looks like. It was sitting at about $300 about 4.5 years ago. $296, give or take. And then they rolled their truck down the hill, or their car down the hill, and as you can see, it goes whee all the way up to $2,000 a share before their failure was exposed. And if you had bought their stock that was at 300 and then went all the way up to 2,000, if you'd bought their stock about a week and a half ago, you would have paid $9.33. And they're a laughing stock in the car industry. It's a miracle that they even still have a stock. They're still trying to put something together, but their exponential failure was because they tried to hide it. That chart would not look like that if they had been open about their failure. If they had said, hey, we haven't figured it out, we're still working on it. For me, let's talk about me. Let's not point fingers at everybody else. I asked you guys to be honest with yourselves. Let me be honest with you. When I was growing up, I had some serious character flaws, lack of integrity. I was a liar, I was a manipulator. I was not a good person 15, 16 years ago. But I hid it well. Did I hide it pretty well, Johnny?
I can't speak to that.
He's being nice. I hid it well. Everybody thought I was great. Everybody thought that I was a good guy. A lot of people trusted me. But it always comes out eventually. And for me, my character flaws exponentially grew when I landed a 14-year prison sentence. I spent from 2009, June of 2009, until May of 2021 incarcerated. That's a true story. Then I had to spend another 2 years under community supervision. Failures not acknowledged grow exponentially. And for me, that turned into, I don't know if any of you guys have been to prison, but prison's not a nice place. I don't recommend it. 0 stars. Okay? I'd say try anything once. That's not one of those things, though.
Don't try prison.
Don't try prison. That was my biggest failure. And it's still there, okay? If you Google my name now, there's a lot of good stuff again. Thankfully, I've been able to do some really cool things in the last 3 years, 3.5 years, whatever it's been. But there's also a lot of bad stuff. Because I tried to hide my failure, and because of that, it all went cattywampus. And I'll talk a little more about that later. If you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's not what the purpose of this is not for me to tell you my story, but I have no problem telling you my story. So when we hide our failures, they get bigger. And from an organizational perspective, when you're talking about being on a team, maybe leading a new person, maybe having kids, whatever it is, when we try to hide our failures, we do at least 3 things. There might be more than these 3 things, but at least 3 things happen when we try to hide our failure. The first thing is we prioritize our ego over growth. We prioritize our ego over growth. We say it's about me instead of it's about we. And the minute I'm not willing to own what I've done wrong is the minute that I prioritize who I think I am, or even worse, who I want you to think I am, above what is real and how we can actually grow together. In addition to prioritizing ego over growth, it creates what I call a culture of perfection. Anybody in here perfect? No? Okay, cool. How many of you have worked for a company, though, that expected you to be perfect? Anybody ever worked for an organization where you were expected to be perfect? That's often because people are not willing to admit and own their failure, and it creates this culture of perfection that says, if you do anything wrong, you're not as good as me. If you do anything wrong, you're harming everybody. And we'll get to some of the practical application in a few minutes, but that's an unattainable culture. And I notice that none of you are still working for an organization like that. Right? Because you don't feel involved, you don't feel like you belong, because you know you're not perfect, but nobody else will admit they're not perfect. And then this is more for leaders, but I think this applies to us all. When we don't admit our failures, we put ourselves on a pedestal. We put ourselves on a pedestal, and it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Eventually, someone is going to find out that your character sucks and you're going to end up in prison for 14 years. Eventually, someone's going to realize that you rolled a truck down a hill and your stock is going to crash. Eventually, someone is going to figure out that you're not who you say you are, that I'm not who I said I was, and there will be consequences. And so it puts us on this pedestal that's not attainable, it's not sustainable, and it can't really go well from that point forward. But there is a trick with this, and the trick is that we can easily be fooled in our own minds. Now, how many people in here feel like there's at least one person looking at you to know how to do better? Okay, if your hand's not up, I'm just telling you, there is somebody looking at you. If you don't realize it, there is. Somebody in this world is looking at you to know how to do better. And once you realize that, whether it's your kids, whether it's your teammates, whether it's a group that's not even a part of WhyGen, the minute you realize that, you might fall into this very understandable trap. And that trap says that if I reveal my flaws and failures, I'm going to let down the people that are looking up to me. I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but maybe you felt that way? You felt like, man, if I tell them this, they're going to be devastated because they're counting on me. And if they find out that I failed, man, they might think that if I can't do it, nobody can. And they might lose motivation. They might give up because I just told them. And so we get into this trap of I have to act like everything is golden. I have to act like I'm the bee's knees. I got to act like everything is great. Why? Because if I don't, then they might not feel like they can do it. And what we don't realize is that when we have that attitude, we think we're serving our team, we think we're helping the people looking up to us, but in actuality, we are irreparably harming them because of these three things. Because it's promoting our image above an opportunity for growth. Because it's creating this culture of perfection instead of a culture of growth. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And because it puts us on this pedestal that they can never attain to, instead of putting us in an opportunity to truly serve our teams. I would even go so far to say that I don't trust people who have never failed. If you're somebody that's managed to keep your PR spotless, I have a really, really tough time trusting you. Because in my opinion, there's really only two options, and Walker touched on one of them a second ago. So the first option is the one Walker didn't touch on. They're either lying, that was me for a lot of years, right? Making it seem like I was better than I actually was. Or they're what I call a knight in shining armor. Now for you ladies, the knight in shining armor usually has a very romantic effect, right? Oh, he's my knight in shining armor. But have you ever thought about what that would actually mean? Knights, Knights, they were supposed to go out to battle. And if you go out to battle, your armor is not going to shine. It's going to be dinged and scuffed and blood and grass and dirt, and it's going to be muddy and gross because you've gone through some stuff. And so if you're a knight in shining armor, you haven't gone to battle. You just stood there and looked pretty. You didn't actually accomplish anything. You didn't actually do anything. You haven't actually forged ahead. You haven't built the building. You haven't gotten the trail going. You haven't done the stuff. And so that's why I would say I don't trust people that haven't failed, because either they're lying and they have failed, or they haven't failed because they haven't actually achieved anything. And that was what Walker was talking about. He said there's people that come in and it's like, you haven't done anything. You've read some books. You've parroted something I could have read or listened to on YouTube. What have you accomplished? Where are your battle scars? Where are your trauma, what traumas have you overcome? Why should I listen to you? And so people that have gone through some stuff tend to be in a much better shape. You can ask anybody that's achieved tremendous results, who has really done big things, ask them. If you have a chance, ask them. Guarantee you they've gone through some really, really tough stuff. In fact, had nothing to do with today, but if you check out the Servant Minded Leadership channel on YouTube, today's video is actually about that. It's about that, often we see the pinnacle. We see the success. We don't see any of the hard work. We don't see any of the discipline. We don't see any of the tears. We don't see any of the weight, the burden, the difficulties that come before success is achieved. But those who do own it, those who are willing to say, I screwed up. Here's where I screwed up. Here's how I screwed up. Here's what I learned from it. Those are the people that can actually serve. Those are the people that are worth listening to. Why? Because they're more empathetic. They know what it's like. They're more compassionate. They've been there, done that. And they know how to communicate through it. They're not sitting there looking at you going, seriously, you did that? No, they're like, no, I get it. I did that too. Let me show you how I overcame that. Let me show you what I did to navigate that. Let me show you how I worked through that. And maybe it'll work for you the way it worked for me. Maybe you have to find your own thing, but just know you're not alone. Because I've done that too. I've been there, I've done that, and I overcame. They tend to speak encouragement. They tend to speak empowerment. They tend to speak life. They're not criticizing. They're not condemning. They're not complaining because they've actually gone through it. So I want to take a second right now to put this into a little bit of action, all right? I'm going to pass out a piece of paper, and I'm going to ask us to complete this right now. I want you to take time to fill out the piece of paper. Now here's the deal. No one is going to force you to read this out loud. So this is just between you, yourself, and whatever other personalities you have hiding in there, okay? But you will have an opportunity, if you'd like, to share this with the group in just a minute. Either way, this worksheet is only going to be as effective as you make it. So how honest you are will depend on how valuable this is to you. If you're not willing to be honest, it's not going to be very valuable to you. But it doesn't hurt me. That's my job is not to make it valuable. My job is to give you the opportunity to see value. So go ahead and take that time. I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to stop talking and fill out that worksheet. All right. One of the benefits of an exercise like this is literally just the exercise. How many of you, this was the first time with this particular failure that you actually mentally processed the lessons you learned from it? First time? Only a couple of you? A few of you? Okay. I find there's an incredible benefit because even when we say, okay, yeah, I learned a lot from that, it's rare that we've actually articulated what we learned. Usually it's more just like, oh yeah, no, I'm better because of that, not like, no, I sat down, I thought through it, I processed it, and here's how I'm now better off. So I think in that alone, I think there's value in an exercise like this. But at the bottom, there was a line that said, I am or I am not willing to share this with others. Who circled that you are willing? Perfect. Excellent. You want to lead us off and share yours with the group?
Yeah.
I want to go back to like the second sentence he said. He said, I went through a divorce. It was because of my choices. Everything he said after that, which is really good, and I commend you, the loss of the weight, the finding your faith, amazing things. None of that's possible until he owns it and recognizes that it's his choices, then he can learn from it. Let's give him a hand. I believe you also had your hand up?
Yeah.
Please. Awesome. She also had the same thing where she said, I wasn't willing to work on the things I knew I needed to work on. I'm going to guess that if we're all being really honest in this room right now, there is something in our life, every single person, we know we should be working on it, and we're not. Until we own that, like she did, we're not going to get past it, we're not going to learn from it, we're not going to grow. Let's give her a hand, please. One more. I know there was other hands raised. Go ahead. Three things stuck out to me. Thank you for sharing. The first one is you mentioned that how many other people have told you about your inconsistency. And this is something for those of you that are doing some form of mentoring, whether you're the senior sales rep on the call or whatever, you can share it, but until it's real to the individual, it sounds like dozens of people have tried to speak this into your life, and you're just now like, you know what, I think I'm going to figure this out. So that's something to really know, that when you're mentoring somebody, you can't take responsibility for them. All you can do is speak life into their situation. Ultimately, it's going to be up to them for when they choose to take advantage of that. Appreciate your taking the choice, saying, hey, this was my choice, and my choice had ripple effects. Our choices always have ripple effects. And what we tend to do to avoid the failure is we tend to focus on the choice, all right? So I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my situation that sent me to jail. The actual act that sent me to jail, I went with 3 of my friends. We had the very stupid idea to light a building on fire. My physical role in this experience was I helped break a window. That's all I physically did. It took me almost 7 years to understand this idea of ripple effect. The fact that I'm what people would call a natural born leader, just me being present encourages the activity. The fact that I broke the window, I can sit there all day, and I tried for years to say, all I did was break a window. Why am I doing 14 years in prison? No, John, you participated in something that resulted in a 10,000 square foot office building getting burned down, and your best friend died because he was the one that lit the match when he was standing in a room full of gasoline. Ripple effect. And I can focus on the choice and say, that's all I did. Or I can say, no, there was a ripple. There was a domino effect that happened, and I am responsible for every part of that domino effect. And until I own that, I can't learn from it. Until I grow in that, I can't become the person that I need to become. And quite frankly, if I was still in that place today, I would have absolutely no right to be talking to you today. Because I would not have actually understood how my actions and choices and failures impacted many, many people. I know I said one more person, but your hand was up real quick. Do you want to read yours?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, hang on. We didn't give a hand to him. Go ahead. What the F is wrong with me? I think we have to get to that place or we don't actually change. If we're not willing to go there, thank you for sharing. Let's give him a hand. Also, if you ever want to blow 40 grand, my bank account is, I'll give you my Zelle. I got you. No, I'm just messing around. All right, so we got to admit our failures. Each of you wrote something on your page. You don't have to tell anyone. No one is going to force you to share it with anybody else. Maybe you're not done working on it, and maybe you're not ready because you haven't finished that part of your journey. But it's going to be up to you. And what I really want us to understand in this moment, regardless of where we are, have we learned the lesson? Are we still learning the lesson? Do we still need to learn the lesson? What I want us to walk away with right now in this moment before we move on to this next part is until we're willing to actually own our failures. Something I did here that I did not like, and I think all 4 people did it, is use words like kinda and maybe. No, I failed. I made the wrong choice. We have to be willing to be honest with ourselves or we're not going to be able to move forward. But once we do, we're in a position to help people. People who fail are better able to help others. It's just the bottom line. When we're willing to share our struggles, maybe somebody else in this room's got some vices. And now they can go and hey, let's make a pact. Let's have accountability. And there's 2 really cool things about owning our failure. The first thing that really helps is that it exposes our humanity. It lets people know, it lets people know I'm human too, and we're going through this human experience together. The second thing it does is it creates accountability. Humanity and accountability. The minute each of the 4 people that just spoke, intrinsically the rest of the room now has this opportunity to speak into their lives and say, hey bro, hey girl, what are you doing? I thought you're working on that. And that is what's critical for our success. We can help other people can help us, and it creates this built-in consideration for others because now you're not trying to be on this platform. You're not trying to put yourself on this pedestal. You're saying, hey, here's what I'm working on. Now, it doesn't mean you got to work on things. I'm not talking about, you talk about like some people be proud of it. I'm not talking about being like, hey, this is me. Accept me. No, we got to work on stuff. We got to get better. We got to grow. But we have to own it. When we hide our failures, we completely eliminate the opportunity to add value to anybody else. Not only do we do that, but people that fail also get to contribute to a culture of growth. Now, this is my heart. My heart is that we're always growing, we're always advancing, we're always moving forward, we're always better. I'm not here to be better than you. I am here to be better than I was yesterday. I am here to be better than I was the John I was 15 years ago. And there's 2 diametrically opposed possibilities in an organization like this. And the way we conduct ourselves on a day-to-day basis will determine which way we go. And this is why this is such high-level thinking. You can have a culture of growth, or you can have a culture of CYA. Everyone know what CYA is? Say that out loud. Cover your ass. Those are your 2 options. Those are your 2 options. You can either have a culture of growth or a culture of superficial perfection that's all about CYA. I worked in a CYA factory. It wasn't literally a factory, but it was very CYA oriented. Everybody was always worried about making sure that nobody could blame them for anything. That was all they cared about. I get a phone call one day. I was the director. That was the executive position I was in. I was the director. I get a phone call from somebody who was 3 levels lower than me in the organization. She was the leader of her team, so there would have been her, then supervisor, manager, director. So 3 levels below, and she goes, hey, I've got this situation. The pricing sheet does not reflect the same thing in these 2 scenarios. We got scenario A, scenario B, and we're kind of like half in between, and I don't know which pricing sheet is the correct pricing sheet. My role at the organization at that time was director of revenue, so I was in charge of basically anything that had to do with bringing in money or everything from sales all the way through to pricing and accounts receivable, all of that, okay? I said, ooh, that's really interesting. I don't know why we have that dichotomy. I wasn't the one that wrote it, though. The CEO was the one that wrote the pricing sheets. CEO was on vacation. I answered directly to the CEO. I said, I don't know what the answer is, but Artie's on vacation. I'm going to make this choice. And if I'm wrong, I will take responsibility. In a CYA culture, that's all anybody ever cares about. If you say, I will take responsibility, they will do whatever you say because they only care that they're not going to get in trouble. And so she said, okay. She went back to the client, said, here's the deal, here's what we're going to do. Now, if I was operating in CYA, I would hope that that never came up again. Had to make the call. No one ever wants to make a call in a CYA culture. Had to make the call. I would hope that it just never came up. No one ever knew the difference, and we could just call it a day. But I refused for it to be a CYA culture. I hated the fact that our company was so CYA, and I wanted to do my little bit of good that I could do to influence that organization. So I immediately sent an email to the CEO with this person that had called me in copy and said, hey, Artie, here was the question, here was the answer, here's the decision I made. If I'm wrong, let me know, and if I'm wrong, and because it was going to cost the company some money, I'll pay for it. So I send the email. That's not what you do in a CYA culture. I'm putting myself on blast. Why? Because if I'm wrong, I need to know. I need to make sure we learn from this. Guess who was wrong? He writes me back with her and still in copy. No, John, that is not how that should have gone. Here's why it goes this other way, blah, blah, blah. Cool, okay? My bad, my apology. Like I said, I'd be happy to pay for the item, blah, blah, blah. He, of course, writes back, no, you don't need to pay for the item. Let's just learn from this. But I didn't want to end it there. I could have ended it there and just kind of tucked my tail and said, okay, I got yelled at, but at least I don't have to pay for it. I took it one step further because I really believe in growth, guys. I really, really, really believe in growth. I called her back, the one that called me. Her name's Norma. I said, hey, Norma. Sir, you saw Artie's email? She goes, yeah. I said, I need you to do me a favor. She said, what's that? I said, I need you to write a QC report on this. Now, if you've ever worked in a CYA culture, QC stands for quality control. You don't want a quality control report written on your name. Okay? Then your name gets brought up in the quality control meeting. And people don't like that. You should have seen the look on her face. You want me to do what? I need you to write the quality control report. I need to make sure everybody learns from this, not just you and me that we're part of this email chain. Are you sure? Yes, Norma, I need you to, you're the one, this is on your order, this is your client, I need you to put the QC report in. I had to call her 3 times before she actually did it. When there's a culture of CYA, where there's a culture of hiding our failures, where there's a culture of ego over growth, when there's a culture of unattainable perfection, when there's a culture of a pedestal, you don't get any of that. But when you're willing to say, hey, I failed, I messed up, let's learn from it, let's grow from it, you can facilitate a culture of growth. And that change, I'm actually really happy to say, completely changed that whole department. And it actually resulted in a chain of events where people started putting QC reports in on themselves. Something that would have been unheard of. Like we had actually one time where 2 people almost got into a fist fight over a QC report. That's how much people hated QC reports. It's a culture of growth. If you're leading, if you're mentoring, if you're coaching, here's what I'm not saying. I am not suggesting to you that there are no consequences. Oh, don't worry, you didn't come in for half the week. Let's grow from it. No, your paycheck's probably gonna get hit for that. You didn't make any sales for 3 days. You didn't set any appointments for 3 days. I don't know exactly what your role is. You didn't do what you were supposed to, and there will be consequences. 14 years. That's not a small prison sentence. Those are consequences, and we have to deal with the consequences sometimes. But I could focus on with action, I could focus on the consequence, you can focus on it, or we can focus on growth. How are we going to get better from this? And I'll say one thing, this is kind of off subject, but when you're looking at growth, never use 20/20 hindsight as your measure for success. When I talked to my sales guys back when I was the director of revenue, one of the things I would do, I'd go over their calls with them, okay? And I would start my conversation, I would say, listen, I need you to remember, I know that when you're going back over something, it's always easier to hear what you should have said. You could go over your call and hear what you should have said. But I'm just trying to give you some ideas on what I heard as I listened to this call. So I'm not coming at you from a, how did you not know? Why didn't you say? What was that? I'm coming at you from a, hey, how does that sound to you? Let's look at this and let's see if we can learn. But don't use the 20/20 of like, duh. Well, yeah, if I'd known that back then, I would have made a better decision. I didn't know that. We learned from that, didn't we? And so it's important that we make sure we kind of keep that separate. All right, a couple of wrap-up thoughts, all right? Failure is also a paradox. I got off on a couple little rabbit trails there because I really enjoyed your stories. Failure's a paradox. Now, what do I mean when I say failure is a paradox? I've been saying own your failure, own your failure, own your failure, admit your failure, talk about your failure. But now I'm going to say, and you can see it there, there's no such thing as failure as long as there's growth. Well, this makes it a bit of a paradox because I don't actually believe in failure if there's growth that comes after it. Some of you may know the story about Edison. Some people quote it as saying 10,000. I don't think he actually said 10,000. Someone asked him about his 700 failures with the light bulb, and he said, I haven't failed 700 times. I now know, or I have succeeded in proving that those 700 ways will not work. When I have eliminated all the ways that won't work, I will find the one that will. Those weren't failures. They were steps. I said this in Phoenix. When you go out knocking doors, what is the percentage of doors that are going to say yes? It's like 2 to 5% that are even going to give you the time of day, right? Pretty small number. Here's the problem. You can't just walk to the neighborhood and go, house 13, 26, and 79. Those are the ones that are going to say yes. It doesn't work that way. It's the knocking for the first 8 doors that don't even open that gets you mentally ready for the 9th door where you have a horrible conversation because you didn't even expect them to answer because of the first 8, but then you learn from that conversation, which cues you up and you have a better conversation on door 11 so that prepares you so that at door 13 you actually make a sale or set an appointment. And then you're like, I got it. This is great. The problem is that doors 14 through 26 are different people, and what worked at 13 doesn't work exactly the same way. And so now you have to modify, and you have to evolve, and you have to become better to get to door 27. And then you're thinking, cool, all right, I've gotten 2 and 27, awesome. That means I'm getting 2 about every 50. No, I know the next one I said was 70 something. Because how many of you know in sales there's the highs and then there's the lows? But you have to go through the steps. You have to knock on every door. You have to have every conversation because each of those failures proves a way that doesn't work. I overheard a conversation. I'm sorry, I don't remember who was a part of the conversation, but the person said, I'm knocking on these specific doors and this sales strategy is not working in that neighborhood. Was that you? I think that was you. I think it was you were talking to Walker. Excellent. And Walker said, oh yeah, that neighborhood, it's not going to. You got to learn that. You got to try it 3 or 4 times and then go, oh crap. These people don't respond the same way as a different section of town does. What is important to them is different than what's important to somebody else. You're never going to know that until you have the conversation. And so you can look at it as, oh, I failed. I didn't sell a single thing today. Did you fail? Or did you learn that you have to use a different strategy for that demographic? If there is growth, there's no such thing as failure. How many of you know the story of Post-it note? Did you know that Post-it note was invented by accident? 3M, the manufacturer of Post-it note, has a policy. If you fail, you don't throw your results away, you file them away, and other scientists will pick up the baton later on. There's a whole team that's just there to look at results that didn't work. Anybody want to guess what the maker, or what turned into Post-it notes, what they were actually trying to make?
I was literally listening to Tony Robbins talk about this yesterday.
Oh, were you? What were they trying to make?
I don't even remember.
You don't remember?
I didn't even
That's all.
started that. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to say this for tomorrow when I can actually digest it. But it's crazy.
There we go. They were trying to make a super glue. They were trying to make the strongest bonding adhesive that you could find, and the scientists that were working on it came up with the stuff that's on the back of Post-it notes. The weakest adhesive you can possibly, the one that you can stick to your monitor and it lasts exactly as long as until you need it, and then you can't find it anymore.
Yeah.
It was a failure. The scientists did not achieve what they were trying to achieve to find and create the most adhesive bond. They filed it away. Somebody else took it, said, hey, what if we put this on the back of some paper and we can now call it Post-it notes? I've been looking for a while. I can't figure out exactly how much of 3M's revenue comes from Post-it notes, but it's not a small margin. The question is not, did you fail? It's what did you do with the failure? And that's why that worksheet is so important. The problem is that when we fail, we tend to go through press-through mode, but before we fail, we live in this suspended situation of what if. I was having a conversation with a mentee of mine. He got out of prison about 6 or 7 months ago, and he was talking about trying to get his driver's license back. He was there on a DUI. He hasn't even applied. I said, why not? He said, well, what if they say no? I said, until you ask, what's the answer? It's the suspended existence of what if. In Phoenix, one of the guys said that he fell into that trap. He stopped knocking for like 2 weeks. What if they don't give me an appointment? Well, they're certainly not going to if you don't knock on the door. Thankfully, he was very honest, very transparent. He's working through it. So I want to help you tackle this. We're not going to do this in our session today. These are designed to be taken home with you. But the worksheet you just did a second ago at the top, it says confession of failures. This is one that you've already failed. You've already gone through it. You've already learned. I'm going to pass these around, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to pass them. I'm going to ask you guys to just take one and then pass it down. Actually, I'll grab a couple of them and pass them that way if I can. Thank you. This is called confession of fear. This is designed for you to go through very similar steps to ask yourself, what am I afraid of failing in? And what's the worst thing that's going to happen? So again, we don't need to do this now. This is for you to take home, to use, maybe make some copies if you want. I hope that it's helpful to you. The goal is that you're able to look at whatever it is you're afraid of failing in and say, what's my worst case scenario? I apply to get my driver's license back. They say no. I'm right back where I was, but I have one in. And with him, I told him that. I said often, because I used to work for the motor vehicle department in Arizona, I said often you have to submit the first one to get denied because they won't accept it until the second or third application. Just part of standard protocol. They're not going to give it to you on your first try. So get that first one in so that you can move past it. You know they're going to deny you so that you can get that second one in. So this is for you to do on your own. You can do it whenever you want. You can do it today. I don't care, but you don't have to do it at all. This is, again, it's for you. It's for your growth. In conclusion, Henry Ford said, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Dale Carnegie said, develop successes from failures. Discouragement and failure are two of the surest stepping stones to success. Thomas Watson Sr. said, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. And something that I have said, the person who sees failure and sees success in progress is a person who is growing and doing their part to change the world. I appreciate your time today, guys. It's been a privilege sharing with you. I hope that it's been helpful on your journey. And I hope we're not afraid of failure anymore.